staff. Well, I'm very happy to announce that we have a motivational keynote speaker today. We really haven't had that in a while. He's a United States Navy SEAL, a wounded warrior, Purple Heart recipient, and a best-selling author. If you can just direct your attention to the screen, we're going to watch a small video.
Jason Redman, he is a retired Navy SEAL who was wounded while deployed in Iraq.
So in September of 2007, I was literally at the height of my career. Everybody in life at some point is going to walk into an ambush. Some sort of catastrophic event that's going to rock your world and have this impact on your life. The majority of people who walk this earth have never wrestled with an enemy combatant in the deep blackness of night. I quickly realized I was helpless. I was totally pinned down in front of my guys, and there was nothing I could do. I would have given anything to be out of this situation. That day became a benchmark for me. It changed everything in my life. I realized in that moment that I got a second chance in life. Most people, you only get one shot to go through this life and make the most of it. And most people take it for granted. In an ambush, we talk about the point of attack. It's called the X. The reason I survived the one that I was in is because we got off the X. And I said, okay, let's drive forward. We can do this. But everybody out there will go through life ambushes. And these are these hard moments that come along and just knock us off our feet. Because we've all been in that situation where we're like, oh my God, I can't make payroll. How am I going to bring in some revenue right now? We can't make revenue. I felt it. I realized the mark of a man is not found in his past, but how he overcomes adversity and builds his future. But the great thing about major life ambushes, they also can define you and make you better, just like that ambush that I went through. If you can create balance in these 5 key areas of something I call a pentagon of peak performance, I guarantee you, you will be ready for any ambush that comes along. When I was wounded, I had gone through that journey where I had colossally failed as a leader, where I had guys say, kick him out and take his stride. It is the hardest road I've ever walked in my entire lifetime. But it built tremendous mental leadership. The only thing stopping you from accomplishing greatness in your life is you. When you are struggling, get off the X and overcome. Kessler, how are we doing today? Big shout out to the winners. Obviously, I speak a lot on leadership, so it is always awesome to see individuals who set the example and make a difference, because leadership is tough. It is a tough thing to get out there and make a difference to achieve those elite levels. This is the emblem of the Navy SEALs. And a lot of people out there will say it is a benchmark of those elite levels. And so often I speak and people will say, oh man, it's great, we're going to have a Navy SEAL speak. This is going to be so entertaining, but there's nothing he's going to say that's relatable to me because I am not a Navy SEAL. Anybody thinking that right now? They're like, this is going to be cool, but yeah, I'm not a SEAL. That's okay. Because the reality is, so many people look at that emblem and they've watched, how many have watched the SEAL movie? Anybody seen maybe Lone Survivor, American Sniper? Maybe you've seen the History Channel specials where they show our guys go through training and they go, oh my God, it looks so difficult. It looks so incredibly impossible. But what people don't realize is it's not physicality or this that enables you to get through training. It's this. It's not this, even though this does play a part into it. It's this. It's not this, all the people you surround yourself with that get you through training. It always comes back to this. And it's not even this, although for a lot of us, this plays a key part in who we are, how we look outside the world, because at the end of the day, it always comes back to mindset. And you see, the great thing about those components is you don't have to be a SEAL, you don't have to be military. It doesn't matter what job you do in life, because these are human elements. And when we start to focus on those elements, you have the ability to understand and operate at the most elite level for you. The interesting thing about the SEAL emblem is there was one point in my career I almost lost it. In 2005, exactly 10 years after I had earned this emblem, I found myself standing in front of what we call a performance review board. You see, I was standing in front of my commanding officer, senior members of my team, and I was listening to things that I never thought I would hear as a young leader, as a man who had built his career on this emblem and being part of this elite community and being a warrior and a leader. And I started to hear statements such as, Ensign Redmond, your leadership abilities, your operational abilities, your tactical abilities have been called into question. We question whether you still have the ability to do this job. And then I heard the statement that almost knocked me over. One of the guys said, we should take his trident. That's the name for the SEAL emblem. I was stunned, overwhelmed. You see, to earn this emblem takes the average person at least 4 years. From the moment they commit to say, I would like to become a Navy SEAL and go through training, the amount it takes them at least a year or 2 years, if they're not there yet, to physically prepare themselves, to mentally prepare themselves, to go through the process of entering the Navy and getting into the pipeline and earning a slot. And when they finally earn a slot and they make it to SEAL training, we have a 75 to 80% attrition rate for people to make it through the pipeline. And even once they complete the pipeline and complete what we call basic underwater demolition SEAL training, you don't earn this emblem then. You still have almost another year of advanced training, of advanced screenings before you finally earn that emblem. Only a little more than 10,000 men on this planet have actually earned the right to wear the trident. And for me to be standing in front of my leadership and hearing those words, I was left speechless. Because I tell you, it's one of the hardest things you could ever encounter, to find out you're trying to do something good and trying to be the best version of yourselves, and you're told you have been found lacking. My commanding officer finally said, okay, I've heard enough. He said, Ensign Redmond, you're dismissed. We'll let you know our decision on what we're going to do tomorrow morning. I walked out of my room in Bagram Air Force Base, or I walked out of that room at Bagram Air Force Base, and I walked back to my room, which was in an old Taliban structure off the airfield. Kind of this old Soviet-looking concrete structure. And we had sectioned off parts of the building with plywood, and we made those into little rooms. And I remember walking back to my room and sitting down. My room was about as big as this stage. My bed was right here. My desk was across from me. And sitting next to me was my gear. My body armor and equipment, magazines and radios and grenades and everything ready to take the fight to the enemy, which is why I was there. On top of it was my rifle, loaded and ready to go. And on the side, hanging off the edge, was my pistol belt, which had different gear, but it had my 6-hour P226 9mm pistol. And I remember sitting there just thinking about everything that had just occurred. And in that moment, I convinced myself it was the end. That there was no way I could move past this point. That there was no way I could drive forward. That I had messed up too much. There's no way I could recover my career. I reached over, drew my pistol out of its holster, did what's called a press check, where you pull the slide back just a little to make sure there's a bullet in the chamber, which I knew there was. I kept my pistol ready to go at all times in the combat zone. And I put the pistol in my mouth and started to pull the trigger. And as I did that, directly across from me on the desk was a picture of my wife and kids. I was married and I had an 8-year-old son. I'm sorry, I had a 5-year-old son. I had a 3-year-old daughter, and I had a daughter that was just barely born. I thought it was the end. So much so that the only time ever in my life I was convinced that the only way out was through a bullet in my pistol. And when I looked across at my wife and kids, I was like, oh my God, what are you doing? What are you doing? Because I realized in that moment that for every hard moment we have in life, because almost everyone in this room has felt this. Almost everyone in this room has felt this moment where you think it's the end. Maybe it's a relationship that got ripped apart that you never saw coming, and suddenly you found yourself either broken up or in a divorce, and you ask yourself, how will I move forward? Or maybe it was raising teenagers. How many of us got teenagers? That's a whole other war. How many of us, have been raising teenagers, and our kids, our perfect children? My oldest daughter at 14 and a half lost her mind, and I was like, where did this demon child come from? And we had to deal with that. There were times when my wife and I looked at each other and it was the end. Or maybe it's a personal injury or an accident. You guys work in a field where people come to you on some of the worst days of their lives after some grievous accident or illness, and they think to themselves, it is the end. Everyone in life has felt these moments. It is a part of being human. But here's what the most amazing thing is. I realized that for every time we think it is the end, the reality is, if you have the right mindset, it becomes a new beginning. It becomes an opportunity to recreate yourself, to make yourself better, stronger, if you are willing to endure the process. Next morning, I checked back in front of my commanding officer, and he said to me, Red, he said, you're a good SEAL. He said, you're arrogant. He said, you're too full of yourself. You're too self-centered as a leader. He said, you have amazing moments where you're a great leader, but you have these other 5% moments where you're not. He said, I believe we can save you. He said, we just got to save you from yourself. And they made me sign this unofficial letter of reprimand, unofficial being the key word, because anybody that's been in the military understands as an officer, if you have an official letter put into your record, your career is over. You will be done. They will process you out. So what he did is he gave me a chance. He said, I'm going to put this unofficial letter, meaning it won't actually go into your record, it will sit in my safe. And you have 2 years to show me you have the ability to perform at the highest levels, to earn that emblem you wear on your chest, and to lead at the level that we all need to lead. He said, then I'm going to send you on a little vacation. Those were not his words, but that's kind of how it came across. He said there's a little vacation spot down in Fort Benning, Georgia. It's a wonderful school called U.S. Army Ranger School. And do I have anybody that's attended Ranger School? It's a fun time. You check in, and you have these friendly instructors that wear these little black hats that say Ranger on them, and they offer you amazing words of encouragement 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That sounds a lot like, move, maggot, all the time. So, constant motivation. You check in and they give you this really nice backpack. You know, it's full of military gear. It weighs about 85 to 90 pounds. And you get it carried around everywhere you go. Everywhere. At night, you get to dig a hole in the ground so you can sleep in it. And then the best thing about Ranger School, they only feed you like once a day. So it's the greatest weight loss program in the United States. I mean, like Jenny Craig, eat your heart out. Average Ranger student loses about 50 pounds. They sent me to Ranger School because they knew it was an opportunity to recreate myself. And I'd love to tell you when I stepped out of that meeting, I was like, yeah, I got a second chance. I didn't. I was bitter because it's human nature when these hard moments happen that sometimes it takes us a little while to move forward. But I humbled myself and I went back to my room and I said, somewhere along the line, you know that it takes this mindset to get you where you are. But somewhere along the way, you lost your mindset. How do you get it back? And I realized it came down to me, and it came down to leadership. You see, leadership is the critical thing that enables all processes. How you lead yourself, how you lead others, and how you lead always. And those became the 3 rules that I wrote down on a piece of paper on how I was going to turn my career around. Because this was not going to be an easy journey. I had damaged my credibility as a leader. And the guys that I worked with didn't want to work with me. And we worked in a profession where if you don't trust the guy next to you, and especially if you don't trust the guy or gal leading you, it's your life on the line. Not just a bad day at work or something going wrong within the office. So I knew I had a long road to walk. So I wrote down rule number 1, I was going to lead myself. The interesting thing about these rules is they apply everywhere and anywhere. And if you ever have one of these moments where you think it's the end, to start on that journey towards a new beginning, it comes back to you. And it comes back to these rules. So I focused on how do I build structure and discipline back into my life to make a difference with the guys that I'm working with? How do I focus on making sure I'm where I need to be at all times, in the right gear, ahead of the time, understanding what needs to be done? Once I focused on that, I realized rule number 2 was going to be, how am I going to better lead others? How am I going to motivate and inspire the people around me? Because that's what leadership is. In that video, I loved it. One of the gals said, she makes you want to work for her. You see, there's a difference between critical question of leadership when you're leading others is, do they follow you because they want to or because they have to? If they're following you because they want to, you are now moving to the other side of leadership where you are inspiring people. That's our ability to lead others. And then the last component I realized is I was picking and choosing when I wanted to lead. And you see, as a leader, we never have that ability. As a leader, once you step into that area, and make no mistake, everyone in this room is a leader. Unless someone is here that your mom got you out of bed this morning, dressed you, and drove you to the conference and dropped you off. If anyone that happened to, please come talk to me. I have a really great coaching program. I can help you, but we got some work to do. But at the end of the day, it was these 3 rules that I realized I had to follow, and I set out on that path. As I moved into my second troop, and we started to get ready, I started going through the training pipeline, it was a long road. I went through Ranger School, I conquered that, I came back, working with the guys, and oftentimes, guys, it was kind of like being back in high school, you know, where you'd go sit at lunch and you were sitting at the unpopular table, nobody was with you. Okay, don't mind me, I'm just gonna eat my lunch here, you know? And it was even like that, but I had done it to myself. I realized it through the decisions that I had made. But slowly, over the next 2 years, I was gaining ground. I was building credibility. I was building respect back with the teammates that I breached that respect. Because at the end of the day, that's what leadership is all about. Credibility is the currency of leadership. This is why this formula works. Because you build it. It starts with you, it goes over to others, and then when we're leading always, people want to follow you because you've given them a reason to. So, I come full circle this incredibly hard journey that I walked to pull myself out of this deep, dark, black hole where I was convinced it was the end, to build back the trust of my teammates and to find myself placed in what we call an assault troop that was heading to Iraq in the spring of 2007, leading some of literally the best warriors and individuals I ever had the honor to work with in my entire career. And we stepped into Iraq in the spring of 2007, which was a really critical point in the war. Back then, many of you may have remembered a term called the Anbar Awakening and the surge. Those were key words that were being thrown around at that time. And what that was a period of time where the Iraqi people did not want to work with us when we first got there. When you step into their country and it got thrown all upside down, so it was a mess. I do not blame them. War is a horrible thing. But after several years of combat and several years of dealing with the incredible violence of Al-Qaeda, they realized that Al-Qaeda was more dangerous to the Iraqi people by far, and by cooperating with us and trying to help us, they could finally get their country back. And in the fall of 2006, the Anbar Awakening was the local sheikhs started providing information for us to execute our missions, to actually go after bad people. And it continued all the way through till the end of 2007, which carried forward into 2008, all the way up to 2010, where there was stability in Iraq. We won't talk about what happened after 2010. I wasn't there to contribute. They didn't ask me what I thought about in that decision-making process. But leading into the spring of 2007, almost every night looked like this. So here I was, I got my career back on track, I'm leading, I'm getting ready to come home. In 3 weeks, I was heading home. Our first wave of guys was leaving next week. I was screening for the next level SEAL team. I had already been ranked for my next leadership position. And on September 13th, we headed off to go after the #1 Al-Qaeda leader for the Al-Anbar province of Iraq. And my team and I walked into an incredibly well-executed ambush. My medic was initially hit as we came up on this target and took a round directly below the knee, which severed both bones and dropped him and anchored him on the ground in front of us. I was continuing to lay down fire when we were opened up on by what we estimate to be about 15 men and 2 very large machine guns that sounded a lot like that montage of gunfire you heard in that video. I was stitched across the body armor. I took 2 rounds in the left elbow, which at the time I thought had shot my arm off. I was continuing to try and shoot and yell at my guys to try and move back. The only point of cover we had behind us was a large, like John Deere size, big John Deere size tractor tire, and nothing but thousands of yards of empty Iraqi desert behind it. Our guys fell back to that. As I turned to try and move to them, a large caliber machine gun round caught me from behind, hit me right in front of the ear. It traveled through my face. It exited the right side of my nose. It blew out my right cheekbone. It broke, what was left of my cheekbone broke and kicked out to the right. The bullet traveled right under my eye, vaporized my orbital floor, damaged my eye muscles. It broke all the bones above my eye. My eye dropped down in this newfound hole in my face, shattered the head of my jaw, and shattered my jaw down to my chin. And then it knocked me out. I always hate telling that, because my teammates give me a lot of grief, and I know you guys are thinking the same thing. You know, my teammates always, whenever I bring that up, they go, let me get this straight. So they're like, one bullet to the face and you pass out. It's true, I'm sorry. So there I am, sleeping on the job, and I wake up and there's this raging firefight going on over me. As I lay there and I came to and I recognized I'm in a really bad situation. I am pinned down. Literally there's gunfire traveling about 8 inches above me. I have no cover, meaning things that can stop bullets. While I lay there on the ground waiting for my teammates to fight back, I actually got shot a couple of more times. I took a round off my right side blade, off my helmet again. Needless to say, it was a bad position. And as I lay there, I prayed that it would just go away. Just absolutely and devastatingly overwhelmed. How many of you felt a little uncomfortable during that firefight video? Be honest. It's designed to be that way. The interesting thing about that is everybody in life has been in a situation like that. They're not actual bullets, they're not actual bombs, but in those moments when we feel like it is the end, it might as well be. Because in our lives, they are the emotional and mental bullets and bombs that are going off around us. And I'll tell you what, if I took you in one of the situations you've been in where you felt like that, and me in the middle of that firefight, and I hooked us all up to all kinds of the crazy medical equipment that you guys know a lot more than I do, but it measured my heart rate and brainwave activity and stress levels and breathing rates and all of that. Amazingly, they would be almost identical. Because the human body doesn't know the difference between I'm in a firefight or I'm in another bad, life-threatening situation. All it knows is I'm going through massive stress. And that's exactly what I felt in that moment. Thankfully, my teammates fought back. We ended up calling in an airstrike, the closest fire mission in the entire Iraq war on our position. And my guys saved my life. They got me on the medevac helicopter, which flew the rotors off to get me to Baghdad. They saved my life. I think I needed like 6 or 7 units of blood over the next 24 hours to save my life from the amount of blood loss I had. My arm, they saved it, although it was incredibly damaged. And within about 4 days, I had gone from Baghdad to Balad, Iraq, to Landstuhl, Germany, where they did several more surgeries to stabilize me and get me ready. And then they flew me on a transport back to America. And as I landed in the hospital, and I was digesting what had happened to me and thinking to myself, this sucks. I was like, I just walked this incredibly hard road, 2.5 years of fixing myself and leading others and leading always. And now I'm laying in a hospital bed. I have doctors telling me they're going to amputate my arm, what's left of it. I had no use of my left hand. They told me my ulnar and median nerves had been severed, and I guess my radial nerve was still okay, but I couldn't use it. I couldn't use anything. I had a stomach tube to feed me. I was trached. My jaw was wired shut. I was too weak to even get out of bed. I was terrified to look at myself in a mirror because I didn't want to see what I looked like. And I sat there thinking about how overwhelmed I felt. And as I lay in that bed thinking about all of that, I'll never forget when the doctor came back into the room and I said to her, or I wrote to her because I couldn't talk, all I could do was write. I said, "Doc, how long is it going to take to put me back together?" I know you guys can relate to this because you probably have had patients that come in there thinking, "Oh yeah, it's only going to take a couple of weeks to get me better," and obviously sometimes it's months, sometimes it's years. And that's what that doctor told me. She looked at me and said, "Months? Lieutenant, we're talking years to put you back together." And in that moment, I felt like I was right back in that firefight in Iraq. I felt like I was taking fire. I felt like the world was blowing up around me. And I just prayed it would just all go away. My entire special operations career, I had learned how to take the fight to the enemy. I learned how to try and pin the enemy into a specific spot where we could either A, capture them, or B, if they were unwilling, to aid them on their way. And the flip side of that coin, I'd also learned that if we ever found ourselves on the receiving end of the reciprocal firepower that we deliver to people, that there was a process we had to do to get out of it. Anytime we took the fight to the enemy, or anytime we were on the receiving end of that fight from the enemy, we called that point the X. You see, the X is any point of attack that can occur. And in order to survive any attack that occurs, you have to get off the X as quickly as possible. And as I lay in that hospital bed thinking about that, thinking about how we got off the X, I realized that I had stepped out of an enemy ambush directly into what I call a life ambush. And you see, everybody in life goes through life ambushes. How many of you, when I told that story about I thought it was the end, and I know because I saw quite a few of you nodding, have felt that exact same moment? Everyone. Almost everyone. And if you haven't felt it yet, I got bad news. It's coming. It's one of the struggles of being human. We all have these crushing moments that come along in our lives that totally turn our worlds upside down and leave us wondering what the hell just happened. Those moments when you were on the X. The average human being will go through about 5 life ambushes in a lifetime. And in my work with thousands of wounded warriors, and now even getting into the area where I'm working with other individuals that have been through trauma, we have kind of gauged what they look like. So a lower level life ambush, believe it or not, I say lower level, but it could be something like the unexpected loss of a job, the unexpected ending of a relationship, a divorce. It could be that business failure, lawsuit, bankruptcy. It could be unexpected illness or injury to you or someone you love. It could be sexual trauma to you or someone you love. And the higher levels are the unexpected loss of a loved one. And one of the biggest ones that I've seen is the unexpected loss of a child. Devastating. You were on the X. And it's in those moments that we're so overwhelmed and we try and figure out how to get out of it. And as I lay in that hospital bed, I was thinking the same thing. And I was stunned and starting to think down that path that I thought that night when I was in Afghanistan that this is the end. How do I move forward from here? How we got out of that ambush in Iraq was because we had trained to do it. We had trained to do it through a series of a process that we call an immediate action drill. And basically, we had trained to understand that if something bad happens, this is what we're going to do. And so many people in life do the same thing. I know in the medical field they do all kinds of emergency procedures that if X happens, here's what we're going to do. If someone has a heart attack, this is what we're going to do. If someone has a stroke, this is what we're going to do. These are called immediate action procedures. Yet, I watch so many people in life that walk through life blindly, and when they get hit by a life ambush and they're sitting on the X, they have no idea what to do. They sit there, and they're stunned. And we have this natural tendency when we have these moments that come along to do exactly the opposite of what we should be doing, which is trying to figure out how to get off the X. So many people spend so much time focused on what they lost, who or what they can blame, and how much they want to go back to how their life was before it happened. But I got to tell you, it doesn't work that way. The bullets and bombs of life don't just disappear. You have to do exactly what we did, which is you have to figure out how to get off the X. When I started looking back on what we went through and how we got off the X's, I started working with more and more wounded warriors. I realized that everyone can have an immediate action drill to get out of the life ambushes they encounter in your life. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what you do for a living, because life ambushes impact all of us. Every one of us gets on the X. So in order to get off the X as quickly as possible, you have to react. REACT is an acronym, because I'm a military guy. If I have any other military guys or gals in the room, we love acronyms. You know, they're like candy to us. We just make them up for anything. I'm not kidding you. When I showed up in Afghanistan, they literally handed me a binder that was like this big, and they're like, here, study this. And I'm like, what is this? Like tactics? Is this like information about the enemy? What is it? I can't wait to read it. And they're like, no, it's about 10,000 acronyms for everything that we deal with here within country. And I was like, well, that's impressive. But this is a good acronym, I promise you. So what do? How do we react when we're going through a life ambush? And the reality is, in this room right here, there's probably at least one or two people that are going through a life ambush right now. But I got good news. I'm going to tell you how to start getting off the X in your life. We're also going to talk about how to prepare for others. So the very first one, when we're in a life ambush, the R is you got to recognize your reality. You have to accept the fact that you are in a crisis, that things have gone drastically wrong. And all of us know both situations in our own lives and situations in friends or coworkers' lives when something is going wrong, but they're not willing to recognize it yet. They're not willing to admit it yet. Because it's human nature that when things are going really bad, we just want to pray it's going to go away. And sometimes we're even in denial about it. I remember about, 48 hours after I got to the hospital at Bethesda, I convinced myself, or I tried to convince myself, that this was all a dream. And literally, if I could wake myself up, I was going to wake back up in my bed in Iraq, that this was just a horrible nightmare that I was having. And at any minute, if I could shake myself awake, I would be out. I was in denial. And as humans, we have a natural tendency to do this. And the problem is, you cannot get off the X until you accept that you're in a crisis. Believe it or not, I actually witnessed this happen several times in combat. Individuals who don't have the level of training, or maybe the very first time they've been shot at, it's a little bit overwhelming. So instead of actually going into their immediate action drills, they have a tendency to just hunker down behind something and just kind of freeze up. And you're like, what are you doing? I'm okay, I'm good. No, dude, they're shooting at us. Like, we need to respond. We got to move. Because they haven't gotten to the point that they're ready to recognize their reality. So this is the first and number one step that we have to do. We have to recognize I am in a crisis. Sometimes it's our friends and family that can help us do this. The people we surround ourselves, even our coworkers. Number 2, we got to evaluate our assets. When we are in any kind of life crisis, whether it's a relationship ending, a business ending, life-threatening illness or injury, the loss of a loved one, the very first thing we have to do is figure out what do we have at our disposal to help us. Do we need a counselor? Do we need a chaplain, a priest? Do we need an accountant? Do we need a lawyer? How much money do we have at our disposal? These are all the things that we can bring to bear, our assets, to be able to address the problem that we're in it. That night when we were in that firefight, as I lay there, I started thinking about, well, what do we have? Well, I had a Marine Quick Reaction Force that was on standby that could have come in to help us if we could. I had another team that was about 150 yards away. I had helicopter gunship support. I had drones that were up overhead. And I had what's known as an AC-130 gunship aircraft that was up overhead. These were all our assets that we had in order to get out of that fight. Life is no different. One of the first things when we get into a crisis, once we finally can recognize, we have to evaluate what we have to utilize to get off the ice. Number 3, you've got to assess your possible options and outcomes. So once we've identified what assets, what things we have, what things we need, then we have to start taking a little bit of time and thinking about, okay, if I have these assets, and this is my option, option A, what is the outcome? What would it look like? If I have these assets and I take option B, what is the outcome? What would it look like? And this is where it starts to get really difficult, because oftentimes people, when they finally admit they're in a crisis, they want to get out of it as quickly as possible because it's uncomfortable, it's not fun, it's painful. And oftentimes they will choose the quickest and easiest route off the X. But so often it actually puts them in a worse position because they didn't take the time to look at both the option and what the outcome was going to be. And so often it takes the harder route to enable that long-term success. Short-term pain for the long-term gain. So this is where it's critical to look through those options. Number 4, you got to choose the direction you're going to go, and you've got to communicate. Here's an interesting fact about life ambushes. Almost never do they happen just to you. Almost every life ambush you're going to be in, other people get pulled onto the X with you. If you have a family, your family gets pulled onto the X with you. If you're in a business, your business members, teammates get pulled onto the X with you. And you see, when that happens, everybody's in pain trying to figure out what we do in these situations. And they're looking for somebody to make a decision. Because it's chaotic, and it's confusing, and it's overwhelming. So that's why it's so critical that as quickly as possible we go through this process, and then we choose the route we're going to take, and we communicate it to people around you. And if you are a leader within any organization, as a family, as a parent, the faster you do this, the more calm it's going to put in the people around you. In June of 2007, before I got wounded, I was in another really vicious firefight on one night. And very complicated. I had multiple wounded. I had 11 women and children that we had to protect. We had to pull into the house and protect them. We had an enemy all around us. And we finally made the decision that we were going to pull back to another house about 60 yards away, and we were going to drop bombs on the house we were in. But in order to do that, we had to take these women and children with us. We had to package up our wounded guys and carry them with us. So it was only when I finally said, this is what we're going to do and spread the word, I chose a path and I had to communicate it, and it enabled us to move off that X. Life's no different. You got to do the same. Here's the secondary effect of choosing and communicating. So many of us have a tendency to go through, we recognize, we evaluate, we assess, and we think about taking a choice, but until you actually communicate it to somebody else, we just kind of continue to go around that circle. The nice thing about voicing it and telling somebody else you're going to do it, you now have an accountability partner. Somebody to go, hey, you talked about this, what you were going to do. I know you've been going through, this crisis. How are you doing with that? Where are you going? If you keep it to yourself all the time, as humans, we have a natural tendency to just not do it. So that becomes the final component. You have to take action. Any life ambush you get into, personal, physical, professional, so many people will go through these steps and then they never take action. Why? Because they're waiting for this perfect moment to come along. They're like, well, maybe I get paid on the first and I'll have a little more money to execute, so I'm just going to wait till then. Or I get, in a firefight, I'm just going to wait till the fire draws down and then I'm going to move. There is never a perfect moment that ever is going to come along. And people will sit there and wait and wait. And the hard thing and the downside about waiting is the longer you sit on the X, it's like quicksand. It will pull you down, and it is more and more difficult to get off of it. I've watched individuals, the most extreme case, I had a wounded warrior I worked with who had sat on the X for 10 years. He had just stopped going out into the world. He finally is now getting out there and starting to live again. But it was so hard because what happens, the longer you sit on the X, you actually get comfortable on it. You get comfortable in this mindset, this victimhood. So this is why it's so critical to get off the X as quickly as possible. And here's the most amazing news. The people who get off it the fastest are the ones that thrive. People who focus on the past, who focus on people to blame, focus on things to blame, they get stuck. They don't move forward. But the people who follow that REACT methodology and look at, this is how I'm going to move forward, and they execute that plan, they thrive. They don't just survive. Now, understand, timelines vary. If you were to lose a child, that timeline to get off the X is a lot longer than some of the smaller life ambushes, the earlier side of the spectrum, maybe losing your job. But no matter what, following this process and figuring out how to move forward will make all the difference. And that's absolutely what I planned on doing when I laid in that hospital bed. As a matter of fact, I launched from that life ambush. And over the next 6 or 7 years, working with wounded warriors and people that have been through trauma, they'd say to me, Jay, how did you do it? Dude, you were in the hospital, you were so mangled, but man, you drove forward and you created your own nonprofit, you were helping people all across the country. How'd you do it? And I'd go, yeah, man, it's the overcome mindset. And they'd say, awesome, what is that? And I'd say, well, it's mental resiliency and it's, being tough and lying. They'd go, great, how do you do that? So for years, I'll be honest, I never really understood. So I started writing again. And I started looking at all the wounded warriors I worked with. And I started looking at my own life. And I started looking at the life ambushes I had been through. And I realized I had been through 3 life ambushes in my lifetime. Number 1 was that leadership failure where I was willing for a moment to almost take my own life. Number 2 was the enemy ambush. And number 3 was after I got out of the military, I got into a bad business deal that evolved into a really ugly lawsuit within a couple of friends. And it almost ended my company. Another vicious life ambush. And the interesting thing was, I started looking at the difference between the life ambushes I had been through and ones that other people had been through, and looking at how people launched or got stuck on the X. And in my 3 life ambushes, I only launched from the enemy ambush. The other ones, it took me a little longer. And I was like, why? What made the difference? And I realized that in my life ambush, and I realized that in the enemy ambush and the subsequent life ambush being put back together, I was perfectly balanced and ready for it. I was balanced in 5 key areas that enabled me to launch from. There's something I now call the Pentagon of Peak Performance, and it's what I teach people to be ready for any life ambush. And it is the most critical thing. If you want to be an effective leader of yourself, of your family, of your business, if you follow these things, you will be ready for any life ambush that comes along. You will lead people better. You will be more balanced in all aspects of your life. Physical leadership, mental leadership, emotional leadership, social leadership, and spiritual leadership. And as I started going through this, I realized how balanced I was. When I was wounded, my physical leadership was at the absolute highest level. And physical leadership being the foundational level of the Pentagon for a reason. You guys know you work in a career where we walk around in this human body that is this amazing piece of machinery. When you are born, we are born Ferraris. And this body has the ability to do amazing, amazing things. Yet so many of us, as we get older, we don't take care of it. It starts to break down. We don't put enough, we don't put the right type of gas in the Ferrari, and before you know it, you get further along in your life and it's just a busted up Hugo in the garage. But the interesting thing about physical leadership is when we take care of ourselves and we keep that Ferrari up, it can do amazing things. It can handle all kinds of stress. And physical leadership is built on 3 components: nutrition, sleep, and fitness. When I was wounded, I was literally in the best shape of my life because I was preparing for a next level SEAL team that had a really, really difficult physical test that I had to take. I was eating well, I was sleeping well, and I'd come back ready and balanced for that moment. And when I was injured, the doctors told me, they said, your fitness literally saved your life. For the amount of blood you lost, most people would not have survived. But your body was able to withstand that shock. And we were able to save you because of that. Now, I'm not telling you that you need to stay in amazing shape so that you can survive some massive injury to your body. The chances of that are pretty slim. But I will say that it will absolutely impact your ability to manage your mood, to manage the amount of stress you take, and to manage how you feel day in and day out. And here's the other component of it, and you guys will know this better than anyone else. I meet so many people who tell me, well, you know what, it's too late for me. I'm too old, or, I got that old sports injury, and that's why I don't work out anymore. I don't take care of myself anymore. Or I've got... I hear it all. They're all lies. You guys, more than anyone, understand that you work in a field where you are trying to help people get back to the best version of themselves. I love you guys. When I was in the hospital, I went from being told that we're going to amputate your arm to finally I had a doctor that said, I think I can save you, who saved my arm, who recommended me to another doctor at Johns Hopkins who said, I'm going to do my best to rebuild your elbow. And he did. And getting me to a point where I could be functional. But I will never forget sitting on the side of my bed as the occupational therapist came into my room and said, so we're just going to start by picking up these little plastic cones that probably weighed an ounce. I don't even know if they weighed an ounce. And I remember putting my dead hand up on the table, and it was the most frustrating thing. Like, I had tears in my eyes because I could not grab this stupid little cone and move it. And that therapist came back and was like, you've got this. Every day, she worked with me. I remember the first time they got me up and they said, we're going to have you walk in place. I was like, walk in place, man? I've run marathons and swam. And she was like, I just want you to walk in place for 2 minutes. Dude, I felt like I had just run across the entire world. I'm breathing heavy. I had to sit back down afterwards, but she gave me gold. She motivated, she inspired me. And everyone that I worked with after that pushed me. Said, we can get a little bit more. The doctor told me I would never lift more than 30 pounds with this arm. 30 pounds is what he said. Last year I deadlifted 300 pounds 5 times. This summer I deadlifted 365 5 times. It's my goal to deadlift 405. I'm not telling you that to say, hey, look at me, I did this. I'm telling you that because it is never too late. Those moments where you think it's the end, those moments where you think, oh, because of this injury or that injury, I can't do this, or I'm too old, it's never too late. Build that physical leadership. It will be the foundational level that will make that difference for you in everything you do. You will feel better, you will look better, and you will be able to withstand stress better. Number 2 is mental leadership. When I got injured, I realized, finally, after this long journey, that the only person that put himself in that chair with that gun in his mouth was me. I was the one that put myself there through poor leadership. And I realized that I needed to start being more open-minded. I needed to start seeking out more information. I needed to start reading more. So I started reading every leadership book I could find. I sought out mentors. I did things to push myself outside my comfort zone and to humble myself once again. And it is something that I encourage everybody to do in all aspects of their life. We are never too old to learn. Be hungry for that knowledge. Find someone who can be better. Find a leader who sets the example that you can learn from and ask them to mentor you. It will make all the difference in everything you do. And when those life ambitions come, you will be ready. Number 3, emotional leadership. This is our ability to manage our emotions. And one of the strongest things is to seek out that positivity in those negative situations. The greatest leaders I've ever met have the ability to project positivity in the hardest situations. And it is that critical trait that will motivate and inspire others. When I was in the hospital, and I was still kind of wrestling with what had happened to me, still trying to figure things out, I had some individuals come into my room, and they started to have a conversation about me and about the other wounded warriors that were on the ward. And I was kind of drifting off, and I was in that, that subconscious state where you can still hear the TV in the background and you can hear conversations, but you're not really engaged. You're kind of drifting off, the eyes are closed. And I started having this conversation about what a shame, what a pity. We send these young men and women off to war, and they come home broken and battered. And they'll never be the same. They'll never lead a productive life out in society because they're damaged. And then they left. And I remember laying there, and those words were like stewing in my mind. And my wife came back, and I motioned to her for my notepad. And as I thought about it, it was eating at me. And I realized you have a choice. And everybody in life has a choice with emotional leadership. See, you have a choice to find the positive or to project that positivity, or you have a choice to sit on the X of negativity and dwell in the bad things that are happening. The reality is you can't change the situation. You're in it. The only thing you can change is how you confront it and how you deal with it. And I realized in that moment I had a choice. I could choose to be a victim, which was the light that this group wanted to paint me into, or I could be a victor and drive forward from it. And in that moment I was like, you know what? I've been through darker, harder times. I just climbed out of this other dark hole. I'm going to climb out of this one too. And I wrote down in that moment, I really didn't give it a whole lot of thought, a little bit of a stream of consciousness. I wrote out this sign, and it said, attention to all who entered here. If you're coming to this room with sadness or sorrow, don't bother. The wounds that I received, I got the job that I love, doing it for people that I love, defending the freedom of a country I deeply love, I will make a full recovery. What is full? That is the absolute utmost physically I have the ability to recover, and then I'll push that about 20% further through sheer mental tenacity. This room you're about to enter is a room of fun, optimism, and intense rapid regrowth. If you are not prepared for that, go elsewhere. And we signed it, the management, to make it really official. You know? And I told my wife, put this on the door. And, in typical spousal fashion, she looked at me and was like, really? And I was like, yes, put it on the door. She put it on the door, and a couple days later, a New York firefighter took a picture of it and wrote a blog about it, and it went viral. It went all across the news. They were talking about it on morning talk shows. I received an invitation to the White House to meet the president. I don't tell you that to tell you these things occurred, because that sign from that day forward and even to today has continued to impact millions of people. I've had individuals that have been through grievous injuries who've reached out to me and said, can I please put the sign on the door? Just 2 months ago, I had a father out of Florida that his wife was in a horrific accident with their 5-year-old son. Both of them suffered massive, massive, massive life-threatening injuries, and his son suffered a massive head trauma. And he wrote me and said, can I please put your sign on my door? Yeah, please, I'll send you a signed copy. Secretary Robert Gates wrote about the sign in his book. First Lady Michelle Obama wrote about the sign, not once but twice in her book. Cancer patients have reached out to me and talked about this sign. I didn't keep the sign because it wasn't mine to keep. We had it framed, and it now hangs in the center of the Wounded Ward at Walter Reed National Medical Center. And when wounded warriors go to surgery, they roll by it and they rub it for luck. Why do I tell you all that? Because you all have a choice. Emotional leadership is a choice, how we manage our emotions in the darkest times. And here's the greatest thing about it. You never know the impact of what that choice is going to have on the people around you. You never know. So choose positivity over negativity. Number 4, social leadership. Who do you surround yourself with? How do you invest time in those relationships around you? When I was wounded, I had built back amazing relationships, not only with my teammates, but I had built an amazing relationship through that hard journey with my wife, with my kids, so that when I was injured, my social leadership was phenomenally strong. Yet I meet all kinds of people in life, especially here in America, that we tend to focus on the wrong things. We focus on our careers first, and our families and friends second. And then when something like a life ambush comes along, it tears our world apart because we hadn't taken the time to invest in the critical parts of our family and friends. We look to try and build those relationships in the hardest times when they should have been built before. All of us in life ride along a train, in a train. You guys are riding the Kessler Physical Rehabilitation Train. I rode the Navy SEAL train. Now some of you may think I'm going to ride this train for the rest of my life because it's an awesome train. I definitely thought that with the SEAL train. I was like, I'm riding this to the end. I hope someday I'll be an admiral, and then I'll retire and drink Mai Tais in Key Largo. That was kind of my goal. Maybe not the Mai Tais in Key Largo, but definitely the career. But the interesting thing about life and the people we surround ourselves with in riding this train is sometimes, especially in major crises, we get thrown off the train. And those work relationships and those acquaintances that we've built, those professional relationships, they don't get off the train with us. They're still riding on the train. The only people who are off with you are your close friends and family. And those are the people you need the most when these life ambushes come. So take the time to invest in these close relationships. Because you never know when a life ambush is coming, and I can assure you they're coming for all of us. Come for all of us. The last one is spiritual leadership. And I know for me, faith is an important part of who I am, but it's not for everyone. So I describe spiritual leadership as your ability to get outside of yourself, your ability to have perspective of the world around you, your ability to look at things are never even remotely as close as bad as you think they are. Especially living here in America. I've been fortunate enough to have been all over the world. I've seen the absolute highest levels of poverty. I've seen some of the most violent things that it's mind-blowing to even think about. That's a human being could do this to another human being. And all of that has given me perspective to get outside myself, to have gratitude for the things that I have, to be able to give back, to be able to make a difference. That's what spiritual leadership is. I fly all the time. I'm probably on an airplane at least once, if not twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week. And it's always fascinating to me that when I land and I get in the car, they always go, "How was your flight?" And I'm like, "It was amazing. Dude, it was the best flight." And they're always like, "Oh my God, what'd they do? Was the crew incredible? You know, did they serve you free drinks? Did you get a meal? Did they upgrade you to first class?" And I was like, "No." I was like, "We didn't crash." That's my mark of a bad flight. That's it. Doesn't matter what else happens. That's perspective. That's spiritual leadership. Realizing all the crap that so many of us allow ourselves to get mired down into. Doesn't matter. Get outside of yourself. Give back. Realize there's a whole big world out there that's going through some incredibly hard times. We all walk around with these, I left my phone over there, but these little, I call mine my electronic anchor. You know, believe it or not, there's still places in the world where people have never even seen one of those things. They're dumbfounded by it. It's a magic box. They're still trying to figure out how to feed themselves. My spiritual leadership was at an all-time high when I was wounded, because I had built it up and humbled myself and had built gratitude back into my life on that journey. Build your spiritual leadership. If you can build balance in these 5 key areas, it will make all the difference in your life. And you'll be ready for so many of those life ambitions that are coming. So how do we do that? It's accomplished through 3 things. First and foremost, it's accomplished through that overcome mindset. That mindset that says it doesn't matter what adversity that comes along, I'm going to figure out a way to the other side. Life's hard. It never goes according to plan. Never. We always get hit with these problems that come along. But if you already build into yourself and say, it doesn't matter what happens, I'm going to figure out a way. I'm going to figure out a way to the other side. That's step 1. That positive, relentless mindset. Step 2, preparation. Start thinking about, if something was to happen to me, I have these tools, this immediate action drill, the REACT principles to get myself off the X, to help my friends and my family and maybe my coworkers if they're in a crisis to get off the X. And if I'm mentally preparing myself and I'm taking care of myself and building balance in the Pentagon, I'm prepared. And balance is that last component. And here's the interesting thing. So many people talk to me about balance and they say, well, they think to themselves that, I need to allocate 20% to family, and I need to allocate 20% to physical fitness, and I need to allocate 20. Guess what? Life doesn't work that way, ever. Balance is not really in balance. Balance is more of, I'm seeking out those times during the different seasons, times, months of our lives to make sure I'm applying time where I can. I'm only going to be home roughly 6 days in October. But social leadership in my family is one of my most important things. Balance is seeking out those little moments to make sure I'm investing in the people that matter to me. My daughter has a volleyball game in about 2 hours. Obviously, I'm going to miss it. So right before we started, I went out into the lobby and I recorded a video. and told her how amazing she's going to be and how to play that game and how to overcome and all these different things that I'm talking about to you. That's balance. It's not perfect, because perfect doesn't exist. What's the last thing that makes the difference? You guys have an amazing job because you give people hope. I mean, you could be, we have guys in the Navy that their sole job is to take care of the sanitation, the human sanitation out of the ship. That was their job. It's tough to give people hope when you're dealing with crap. You guys are providing people hope. You guys gave me hope. And hope is a critical element that enables any human being to do incredible things. Hope is what enables teams to go the mile, to be able to do anything. Hope is what enabled me to get off that axe in Iraq. Because I knew my teammates were there for me, and I knew that Air Force AC-130 was going to get me out of there. Here's the funny thing about hope. When you were born, we are born with an ember inside of us. And through the right encouragement from our parents and friends and teachers and coaches, that ember, it starts to grow. And it'll grow into a fire. But the reality is, for most people in this life, we don't allow it to. And slowly, with more life ambushes and storms and the torrential downpours of life, we let that ember go out. And so many of us walk around with a piece of coal inside of us. Here's the reality. You can reignite that coal to get going. You can create that amazing inferno. And that's what we need to do. That's what hope is. It is that ability to ignite it and let it burn so that everyone around you, that's what that relentless optimism is. That is the overcome mindset. I have friends of mine that are New York firefighters who happen to be there on 9/11, and they talk about that 9/11 was a fire they call a no-impact fire. There was no amount of firefighters, no amount of fire equipment, no amount of water that could put a dent in that fire. They literally would have had no impact on that fire. That's what hope is. Creating a no-impact fire in your life, creating a no-impact fire in the people around you, creating a no-impact fire within you. That is what will enable you to drive forward and overcome anything. And it doesn't take much to ignite it. It just takes a little bit of belief. It takes a little bit of preparation. It takes a little bit of balance. It takes a little bit of creating time in those areas of Pentagon Peak Performance. And if you do those things, I assure you, you will be able to get off the axe and overcome all. I am incredibly blessed to have been able to tell my story in the Trident. And the Trident, New York Times best-selling book that came out in 2013, follows my journey of young leadership to failure, to recovery, to redemption, to massive injury and coming to understand you can lead from any situation if you choose. Your attitude will determine the outcome, and how to drive forward from there. And it's also a love story. Yeah, it follows the journey of my wife and I, from the time we met until all the way through my career, how she was literally my best nurse, my best friend, my business partner. So, and then I have my new book, Overcome, coming out in December 10th. It's available for pre-sale now. But it follows everything I talked about with life ambushes and the Pentagon Peak Performance. It follows those 3 rules of leadership. I had amazing contributors to the book. Individuals like Admiral Bill McCraven. Anybody see the speech, Make Your Bed? Great speech. So Bill is that guy. Bill contributed to my book. General Stan McChrystal was the general overall in charge of the war in Afghanistan. You may not remember his name, but you'll remember he was the guy the Rolling Stones article came out about that had to go resign to President Obama. Remember that? Bueller. Anyways, it was a major, major life ambush for a guy who probably would have gone on to be the senior leader in charge of the entire military. Who was an amazing, amazing leader. I actually worked under him. And in a split second, his career was over. And he tells that story in the book, how he moved forward, how he got off the X and made a difference. So if any of you are interested, there's a couple of different ways you can get my book. One, you can go to my website. You can put in the code Kessler for a 20% discount. Or we have order forms. I have order forms with them, and I'd be glad to talk to all of you about that afterwards. My new book, I have a specific deal with Books A Million right now. If you go to booksamillion.com/overcome and you put in the code Overcome 2019, you get 25% off on the pre-order, and then they'll ship it to you on December 10th. You will receive it. The last thing, I know some of you are going through a life ambush because I could see the look on your face as I spoke. And I know some of you have been through life ambushes. And I got bad news, some of you are getting ready to hit life ambushes. You're going to be on the X. So I have designed a course called 72 Hours of Peak Performance to help people. That course is also on my website. It comes with specific tools to try and help you. I feel like I got a second chance that night. I shouldn't have come home. It is now my new mission to try and help every single person out there be the best version of themselves, to be balanced and to be ready to deal with these life ambushes that are coming to all of us. So these are the ways that I'm trying to give back and make a difference. So I want to thank you guys for allowing me to speak. And I will open it up for any questions. And I will be here this afternoon afterwards. We have the order forms if anybody wants to get the Trident, which is available now. Or I'll be here at dinner tonight also. So I'll answer the very first question. I always get asked it every single time. I'll go ahead and so I am the only Navy SEAL that's walking this planet that did not shoot Osama bin Laden. I was not there. I didn't pull the trigger. I wasn't on that mission. So there you go. You're welcome. Yes, ma'am.
So I loved everything about this. In fact, I just sent some screenshots to somebody and it was who's going through a spot on the X. But I have one problem
Sure.
with one thing you said.
Please.
And it's the word hope. Because, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Rich. The word hope, because I don't know if you were aware, there was a ship called the SS Hope that sank. And it's a true story, but because a lot of times when we're dealing with patients who might be terminal or in family lives, sometimes too much hope may not be good, and I understand what you said about a balance. So are there ever times you have found where you can't put hope in the equation?
No, I have not. Because here's the thing, even if you were to tell me today I'm going to die, hey Jay, you got 6 months to live. Okay. I'm going to make the most of those next 6 months. And I'll be honest, I am a fighter, so I'm going to probably fight in between. I won't waste too much time, but I'll be looking for a cure or something I can do. And there's so many people out there that do that. We get knocked down. Life is hard. We have those setbacks. Viktor Frankl wrote the book, Man's Search for Meaning. Viktor Frankl was a Holocaust. He was a psychologist that was in, I'm sorry, what? I can't remember. He was in one of the most horrific concentration camps during World War II. I can't remember the name of the camp if somebody else can remember. But he wrote about that hope was what made the difference. And he didn't know it. The next day he was going to be marched to the gas chamber. There were several times when he was there, he got super sick, and obviously the Nazis weren't helping them to get better, and he thought he was going to die. But that's why I tell people it is a choice. It is a choice. If you have been given a terminal prognosis, you can't change the outcome or it's unlikely you're going to change the outcome of what's going to happen. So you can either choose to just be miserable, or you can have hope for a good life for the rest, whatever days you have left. You can have hope to know that I'm going to spend time with the people I love. That's where hope exists. Life doesn't always unfold in the manner we think it's going to. So I don't say hope is this unrealistic that I'm going to have this miracle recovery. I think that's unrealistic. No different than it was unrealistic to think that someday I'm going to be as strong as I was before my injuries. I write about this in the book. I went through a little bit of a process to figure out I wanted to be back what I was before I was injured. And it will never happen. I do have serious limitations there. I can't bend any further than this. I can't extend any further than this, and I still have some lower nerve damage. But I can hope to be the best version that I have the ability to be now. And I think that's where hope plays into. That's where you can ignite that fire. Did that help?
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
Jason, a room of many therapists here. What do you remember, other than some of the stories you shared, of how they inspired you to work harder and get through your obstacles and really physically challenge yourself? I know you touched on it a little bit, but were there other moments or memories you had from it?
I think one of the biggest things I remember, I'm a very goal-driven person, so they did not set me up for unrealistic goals. And I think sometimes doctors will tell you the absolute worst case scenario, like the doctor telling me you'll never lift more than 30 pounds again. I'm sure in his mind that was like the minimal level I'd ever achieve. But I feel like you're setting people up for failure, because some people will accept that that's the best they'll ever get, and they'll never push past that, even though they could have the ability to, like I did. I mean, I did so much more than what he ever thought possible. So for me, the physical therapist that I worked with pushed me. And we would set little goals. Okay, so if you lifted, 9 pounds this week, let's work on 10 the next 2 weeks. But I remember the biggest success for me literally started with that walking. It was when I walked next to my bed, and then it became, okay, I want you to walk out of your room to the nurse's station. And I remember the first time I walked around the entire nurse's station. And I'm like, woo, look at me. You would have thought I ran a marathon or something. And then over, the months that I was in the hospital, by the end, like I remember those benchmarks. Like the first time I went up multiple flights of stairs, because actually they wouldn't let me out of the hospital until I proved I could go up and down stairs. But my ability to do stairs. And I remember the first time I walked all the way around the hospital and came back to my room. So for me, those were the things, and my physical therapist was there, cheering me on, and that was awesome. They gave me hope by pushing, understanding that we can push everybody a little further. And sometimes we won't make it. I remember when I was trached for 7 months and 2 days. And I don't know if anybody's ever been trached, but there's a little bit of restriction when you breathe, because the air is going through your trach and out of your mouth and your nose, and it's restricted. So if you're ever trached, it's actually a lot easier to breathe through this trach hole, as long as it's not congested, than it is to breathe through, your mouth and nose. So when they first capped my trach, I felt like I couldn't breathe. I'd gotten so used to wearing that I was like, oh my God, I can't breathe. You got to take this off. And interestingly enough, the therapist was smart enough she gave me a goal after that. It was like, I want you to go for, I think it might have been 5 minutes that first day. Well, I'm ridiculously goal-driven, so I was like, yeah, 5 minutes, I'm going to do 30 minutes. But it enabled me to get used to it again, and to understand, and I think this is critical in your jobs, to get people to understand the difference between, and I'm probably preaching the choir, but the difference between discomfort and pain, and to push through that discomfort to accomplish those goals. So those were some of the things I really remember them helping me with. Yes, sir.
My uncle was a Navy SEAL.
Hang on, Paul.
So he was a little daft in the head like I am.
He was, but what I want to do is thank you so much for this presentation and thank you for your service to our country.
Bigger than anything, I hope that you guys found it relatable. I mean, my biggest thing is, obviously I want to be entertaining, you know, I mean, that's kind of part of speaking, but at the end of the day, I don't want you to walk away and be like, yeah, this Navy SEAL told this great story. I want you to be able to say, man, those are human lessons, and I know they are. They have worked so often in all the places I've dealt with. They will work for you. You guys can ask me anything. I will answer literally almost everything, except for the things that I won't answer. Yes?
How do you feel with all your injuries? How do you feel on a daily basis? Just getting up in the morning, you have some time of that?
Some days, yes. I don't know if you heard that question, how do I feel on a daily basis with my injuries? The biggest thing I've come to learn is the more I work out, the better I feel. Like if I go multiple days without working out, I just feel really stiff. And some days I'll push it too far. I've come to learn, interestingly enough, deadlifting, you would think that that would put a lot of strain on my elbow, but my elbow's never sore after I deadlift. But I can't, we were joking about this the other day. What do we call this? Pronation, supination? So what is this one? Supination. So I can't do that with this hand anymore. And it's very painful as I start going further over. So there's a lot of exercises in the gym that I've tried to do, like this motion with the chest. I want to do it, but oftentimes my elbow is really painful doing it. And I just have to recognize, well, sometimes I try and push through it and just use lighter weight, but then it'll be painful for several days afterwards. And I recognize, okay, I shouldn't do that anymore. So for the most part, I've come to learn that the more I move, that the better I feel. And I try and encourage other wounded warriors and people that have been through trauma as much as possible to do some of the same. So.
Since Jay got off the plane yesterday, I think he's been in the gym 3 or 4 times already.
No,
Twice yesterday.
twice, yeah. I didn't make it today yet. I'll have to go after this. So they have a great gym here. Like it's like man, I was like literally, I work with a coach and whenever I go someplace, first place I go to the gym and I like film the gym and I send it to him and then he'll say, okay, here's a workout. And like I walked in the gym yesterday and I was like, this gym makes me happy. It's like a nice gym, you know? Yes, sir.
When you're building your plan to get off the X, and you want to keep that hope, you want to keep that optimism, do you ever also build in, I guess what's called a fail-safe, where you have to realize that maybe your plan isn't working, and you also need to have the humility to know, okay, my plan isn't perfect, maybe I need to come up with something else. Like, do you encourage that?
Yes. So contingency plans is what we call them. And I've met some people out there that are like, oh, you don't do that, you just burn the ships and you go. I'm not a fan of that plan. I don't think that's a good way to set yourself up for a really hard fall. I mean, in special operations, we always did contingency plans. You know, we always thought about this is how we're going to execute this. Oh, by the way, it may not go that way, so what do we do if it goes this way or that way? And I am a huge fan of it because life definitely does not end. And the paths that we set for ourselves so often don't run the way we think they're going to. I talk about this in the book also, that sometimes when we get off the X, we actually move from what it was a bad position, but sometimes we put ourselves in a worse position, not intentionally, but now, and it's easy to lose hope in that situation. But you just got to start the process again. You just have to develop a new plan. And you kind of got to take a breath and just say, okay, we're here where we are. Once again, the biggest thing I tell people is don't focus on the pain and the misery because it's there no matter what. If you focus on it, it's only going to make it worse. So instead, focus on how do you drive forward and get off it. regardless of how many times you've been knocked back down. You know, there is a way out of it. It's going to take time, often it's painful, and sometimes we may have to do that REACT methodology 2 or 3 times before we finally get ourselves really permanently off the X. So, absolutely. Good, great question. Give that man a cookie. Sugar-free, gluten-free, a good cookie. Are there any other questions? Family, marriage?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am. M.
Yeah, so do you ever find yourself that you're continually on a new X has come? You've overcome one, and now you're hit with another, and that one you may not be able to as easily rectify, and yet another storm is coming, and you have to replace it with that one. And do you ever find that you might lose one along the way?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And I also, you get tired. I won't lie. There are times, I categorize ambushes in 3 different categories. You have micro ambushes, mini ambushes, and then major ambushes. So micro ambushes are the ambushes of the mind, and we all encounter them, like probably weekly, and depending on how your personality is. Believe it or not, my personality is naturally negative. I am a skeptic on everything. And so it takes a lot of effort and energy for me to project positivity in everything I do. I have to have a very conscious effort to do it. But I get hit with those micro ambushes. Those moments that say, you're not good enough, oh, you want to be, whatever, next step of leadership, or you want to do this, or you want to start your own business, or whatever it is, that little voice in your head that tells you, yeah, you're not good enough, you're not fast enough, you're the wrong race, sex, creed, color, demographic, background, whatever it is. Those are micro ambushes. And they hit all of us all the time, and they slow us down. Mini ambushes are like schedule disruptions in the majors. So we hit them all the time. And there have been times that I've definitely been like, really? And there's also been times where I'm like, dude, you got to get up. You're the overcome guy. You can't have a weak moment. But I do. I'm human. I'm human. I don't care that I'm a Navy SEAL. I don't care what I've done in the past. We are human, and that's okay. You are going to have moments where you may need to sit and take a breather. Remember when I told you the timeline to get off the X sometimes can vary? That's okay. As long as you focus on the fact, I can move. You can't sit there forever. You have to get up and move. And this is where sometimes you've got to rely on the people around you to help you. In my book, I get a little deeper into this in the REACT methodology, because in the recognition process, people go into denial. The second thing they do is we have a tendency to avoid other people. We push other people away in our life crises because we don't want to, we don't want to admit we're going through this problem depending on what it is, and B, we don't want to admit weakness and all those things. And oftentimes, that's the most important time for us to reach out to other people and get them to help us. My wife is my biggest teammate in my moments when I feel a little weak and maybe all bent. She's so funny because she'll be like, hey, do you want to watch one of your videos? And I'm like, roger that. Let's go. Let me get off the X.
So I guess we have time for one more quick question. Also, Jason's going to stay with us throughout the day. He'll be at the dinner tonight, so make sure you carve out some time to hang out with him and spend some time and get to know him, more outside of today's presentation. So, any other?
Just also, I have the sheets if anyone, Jenny, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. M has the forms for the books. Yes, Jane.
Hello.
Hi.
You talked about the first time you were on the X and hearing from your leaders, like you worked so hard to get to that position, and hearing from your leaders that you weren't achieving and meeting their goals. Like, I say a big part of leadership is self-introspection and getting to know yourself. How did you go through that process and really be introspective and not take that feedback as negative?
It's a great question. I didn't in the beginning. I'll be honest. It took me about 5 months to fully come to grips with that. And my book, The Trident, really follows deep that whole journey because I wasn't in the beginning. I wasn't understanding my strengths and weaknesses. I was immature and arrogant as a leader. So I saw it more as attack instead of, hey, constructive criticism on how I can make myself better. So it was really that journey, and it wasn't until I was at Ranger School and a couple of things happened that actually made me wake up and for the first time look at myself and say, you know, you want to blame everybody else for being here, but the reality, it was you. It was your own flaws, it was your own decision making, it was your own misunderstanding of how you tick, and not learning to manage those things before I finally came full circle. And I think that's critical. I mean, even to this day, emotional leadership is my weakest area, and I know I have to watch that within myself, because if I'm not careful, even to this day, I will view things as criticism and, you know, take a step back and, okay, is there validity in what they're saying? So I know for me, that's what made a huge difference. Fine. So, great question. So, okay, guys, I want to thank you guys for having me. You guys have an amazing job. You have the ability to help people be better. I mean, like, that's my mission in life. I want to meet people, and when I'm done, I want to walk away and they say, that guy made me better. You guys do that all the time in the job that you have. And you may not always recognize it. You may have somebody that's negative and they're like, bah humbug, when they walk away. I'm not the same guy or gal I used to be. But if every day they're getting a little better, you guys plan them. And that does indeed, in my opinion, give them a little bit of hope for a better future. So thank you for what you guys do, and thanks for having me. I will
Thanks, Jason.